We're live.
Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Bontempo.
Hi, everybody. We'll just let you come on in before we start our session, but can you tell us where you're from?
Yeah, we have Durham, North Carolina, Fairfax, Virginia, Cincinnati.
Excellent. See some familiar names here.
Wonderful.
And we're in different places too, right? Oh, here's our good friend from Poland. Eric, you are in Texas. Sonali, where are you?
Let's see. I think Sonali is Chicago.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. I am Chicago.
And Susan is, I'm not quite sure where, and Susan's in Mississippi.
Susan is who knows where.
We have somebody from France. Wonderful.
Wow.
This is not a great timing for being in France and Poland. So thank you particularly for joining us. Should we go ahead and start, do you think, Eric, or should we wait a little bit longer?
I think we should wait one more minute. I'm looking at the email, and we still have some folks working to join us, and we want to make sure they feel ready to go. Wow, 1 a.m. in Poland. That's some dedication.
Thanks, Jennifer. Looking forward to it too. All right.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Eric Bontempo, and I am a co-director of Jane Austen and Company and an assistant professor at Abilene Christian University. I am joined tonight by my co-hosts, UNC professor Inga Brody and Delta State University professor emerita Susan Allen Ford. Our technical director, Nadea Pugh, is an undergraduate student at UNC Chapel Hill, majoring in English and comparative literature. David Palco, a PhD student at Duke University, is also one of our hosts for the season. And each of our events this season will have a different combination of us present. Tonight is opening night for our new season of Jane Austen and Company.
Woohoo!
Yeah, and we are so thankful that you are joining us. We appreciate the tremendous support that you all have shown for this public humanities endeavor. And we are excited to bring you another season of thought-provoking conversations about Jane Austen, her world, and ours. We have an eclectic and fun lineup planned for this season, and I'm going to turn things over to one of our founders, Dr. Inga Brody, who will explain what this current series is all about.
So I'm going to keep this brief because several of you have come to other sessions of ours. But Anne Furtick and I started Jane Austen and Company in this virtual format back in 2019 when COVID forced us to get creative. It's blossomed through several series, all of which you can find on our website, and Sonali is already up there. In all, there are over 30 interviews with authors, scholars, and artists that in one way or another shed light on Austen's time and ours. So I encourage you to look through that library of freely available videos. We've called our new series Many Flavors of Jane Austen, and this title is largely inspired by Sonali's series in particular, including Pride and Prejudice and Many Flavors. And we're returning to where we initially started, interviews with some of the most creative contemporary adapters of Austen. And as you've seen, Sonali, can you get Nadea, can you get the next slide up? Yes. There are several people involved in Jane Austen and Company. And while we've sadly had to say goodbye to Anne Furtick, because she's pursued different adventures in the humanities, I think she has a new podcast in the works. Last I heard, it was Afro-Bend to Austen, so that could be very cool. But this is our team for this particular series. And as Eric mentioned, we won't all be on each time, but a subset of us will. And we look forward to tasting all these adaptations with you one by one. Thank you.
So it's my pleasure, and I'm sorry my photo isn't up there, or my image, especially since I washed my hair. It's my pleasure to welcome tonight's speaker, Sonali Dev. USA Today best-selling author Sonali Dev writes Bollywood-style stories that explore universal issues. Her novels have been named Best Books of the Year by Library Journal, NPR, The Washington Post, and Kirkus. She's won numerous accolades, including the American Library Association's Award for Best Romance, the Romantic Times Reviewer Choice Award for Best Contemporary Romance, multiple Romantic Times Seals of Excellence, and she's been a Romance Writers of America Rita finalist, and also has been listed for the Dublin Literary Award. Shelf Awareness calls her not only one of the best, but one of the bravest romance novelists working today. She lives in Chicagoland with her husband, her 2 visiting adult children, and apparently the world's most perfect dog. For us, our special connection to Sonali is her wonderful series of Austen-inspired books set in California among a family of successful immigrants from India whose adventures mirror specific Austen novels. And Sonali has participated in the Jane Austen Summer Program, as well as in an earlier Jane Austen and Company interview to which Inger alluded in our Staying at Home with Jane Austen series, which was the first series that we did. And as Inger said, you can find that previous interview with Sonali on our website. During that, she spoke mostly about the first 2 books in her Austen-Adjacent series. And tonight, I think we're going to focus mostly on the last 2, but I'm sure they'll all sort of enter into the conversation. We're posting an Amazon link to her Rajes series so that you can follow that if you don't yet have the books and haven't yet read them. And now, before Sonali begins, our technical director, Nadaya, will explain how you can send in your questions during our conversation with Sonali.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. Welcome to YouTube, our streaming platform. If you'd like to leave a comment or ask a question, please use the comment feature on the sidebar. Sonali may answer some questions throughout the presentation, but otherwise your questions will be collected for the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You will need to log into your Google or YouTube account to post there, but if you do not have a YouTube or Google account, that's okay as well. You can submit your questions to info@janeaustenandco.org, and we'll collect questions there as well and ask them for you in the chat.
All right. Thank you, Nadaya. And without further ado, we're going to turn things over to Sonali Dev. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome everyone, especially those of you who are here at 1 a.m. I am incredibly honored to have you here. So when Eric and Inga came to me and to speak at the program, I figured, the first thing I always start with is that I am not a scholar of Jane Austen. So you're almost all of you on this call are probably more scholars of her work than I am. I have been to the Jane Austen summer program, and I have witnessed firsthand the absolutely detailed and deep knowledge that everybody has of Jane's writing and her work. What I am is a fan. What I am is someone who was very deeply influenced by her very young. And by that, I mean the person I am, the adult woman that I am. We could pretty much blame Jane Austen for that, because, and I'm going to talk about that angle of all of this, how she was personally an influence in my life, not just as a writer, but as a person, and how that then gave rise to these 4 novels, which are my 4 favorite Jane Austen novels. And those are Pride and Prejudice. Mine's called Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. And I love that that the title of this series, gains some inspiration from that. That's very exciting. And then there is Recipe for Persuasion, which obviously is persuasion, and In Sense and Sensibility, and The Emma Project. So those are the 4. And my son, aside here, my son, when he was in middle school, when I was first thinking about these books many years ago, because they sat in my head for a very long time, my son is the one who kind of came up with most of these titles, and I'm so incredibly proud of. He was probably like 12, so that's that's my little inside secret for where the titles came from. But coming back to my introduction to Austen, I was probably in 6th grade, so I was in middle school growing up in Mumbai. And when I first came across her, and ironically enough, my first introduction to Jane Austen was a retelling. So this was, I think, 1983 or 86, like thereabouts, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. But this was back when television was not the thing it is now. It was basically, we had a couple hours of TV every evening. I'm talking about in Mumbai. This was not even, I think, available everywhere else in India. But in Mumbai, we had about a couple hours of television. I don't even think it was every day. It was a few times a week. And so when a new TV show came along, it was a very big thing. And there was one named Trishna, which means thirst, and and it was basically a scene by scene, dialogue by dialogue, retell, character by character, completely faithful plot retelling of Pride and Prejudice, set in India, in modern day India of the time. So it was contemporary, set in India, and all of it was translated into that world. And the thing I remember, and it was a big deal. So I mean, the man who played Darcy was a real life prince. So we had Darcy mania in India long before Colin Firth showed up. But the thing I remember, and growing up in India, and thanks to colonization, studying in English, my medium of education was English. So most of the books I read, all of the literature I was consuming was American and British authors. And so that was one side of the stories I was consuming. The other side of the stories I was consuming was, the stories my epics, and stories my mothers told me, and Bollywood films, and that sort of thing. And in across the board, across that, the Western literature and the Indian literature that I was consuming, I had never read a book that centered a female protagonist, and especially that didn't center a female protagonist who wanted something and got it. So, if women were were in supporting roles definitively, and everybody who is born before a certain date knows what I'm talking about. Women were always in supporting roles. Women were always in roles of sacrifice, and being everything for everyone. And if there happened to be a story where women, where the female protagonist wanted something, you could be darn sure that she ended up learning the lesson of how bad it is for her to desire something, whether she ended up in a padded cell, whether she ended up a miserable ghost, whatever it was. So for the when I and Elizabeth Bennet's character was named Rekha in this show. And what I remember being like stopping me in my tracks was the fact that this was a girl who had opinions. This was a girl who did not temper them to pander to the aunties, which was, the society in general. And most certainly didn't, temper them to be liked by a man. And then she was actually admired for those opinions. And something inside me, uh whatever natural belief I had about myself, that was not being reinforced by the world around me, which told me constantly that silent was better, that that listening was better than speaking, and all of those things that I was taught. Something inside me literally just sat up and said, what is this thing? Because this thing I believe naturally about myself, I'm actually seeing it in a story. And the power of that was that I ran to my school library. I checked out Pride, Prejudice, read the other three books that growing up I was obsessed with. And it made it okay for me to be me. So that is, that essentially was the reason that Jane Austen will always be Jane Austen. Then growing up, to me personally, and then growing up, um, I was already writing all of her. So two things happened. For one, everybody that populated these four novels knew each other. In my head, this was a world where everybody knew each other, right? So so it was all under one universe. The Dashwoods knew the Bennets, and everybody kind of lived in the same circle and associated with each other. So I always had the stories that I was rewriting. So in my as a young person, I was continuously rewriting these stories with in my world. So based in in my world of aunties and uncles and rules, and of course all of the heroes were either someone really cute in my class, or or a Bollywood hero. So I was already translating the stories. So by the time I took started to take writing seriously, I knew I was going to do something in terms of my work where I was going to pay homage to Jane Austen. But I knew pretty soon that it was not going to be translating her work into my work and into my world. That has been done several times. My introduction to her work was that. So that's been done several times. It has been done incredibly well by by authors into every culture, every form, as you well know. So what I knew what I wanted to do was bring myself to the page, but pay homage to the things I had learned from Jane Austen as a young person. So those of my belief systems that are that come from having read her books, that formed me, those were the things I was going to speak to. So I'll quickly talk about. I think I have Inger has talked about the last time I was here, and I might have spoken about about the Pride and Prejudice piece specifically. I'm sorry, that's my puppy, but the world's perfect dog isn't being so perfect today. But so Pride and Prejudice was is obviously thematically clearly about how every time we meet somebody, um, we're not really meeting the person, we're meeting a holographic projection of our own uh, our own perspectives, right? How we see the world. And so that's how the first time you meet someone, that's how we're interacting, and that has not changed over time. And that really is in my opinion what Austen is speaking to. And reading that book was for me stopping to think about that at a very young age. So I kind of wanted to speak to that. But also it is about privilege. It's a study, I think, across the board. For me, the angle that stands out with Jane Austen's work is her speaking to privilege. Now, I do believe it is, it's sub privilege within a a world of privilege, but it is, it is speaking to what class does to us, right, as human beings, what we're taught about ourselves from a very young age, about our own worth, and how that ties to us in the social ladder of the world that we occupy. And I think she speaks to that a lot, and I think that has continued. That's one of the reasons her work is so relevant today, because she her commentary took that into consideration. So to me, being an immigrant in America, one of the things that I wanted to do was actually examine that. And I think, to me, Darcy is epitomizes all the privilege of his time, right? I mean, there is at the time every possible privilege available to human beings in in that social strata, or in that time in England he had. So I actually made a list. I made a list of everything that gives us every piece of privilege that gives us a leg up, whether it is generational wealth, education, of course. The thing, another piece that sits with this is that Darcy, when we first meet him, is a jerk, right? And that is the whole thing, is Lizzie Bennet's self-worth, where when one of the richest men in England is offering for her, and the choices between him and destitution, she has enough self-worth to say, I deserve better, which is a thing, I think, which is a fight even today. We fight, and another reason why I think this endures. So, that being true, I think that unarguably, Darcy is one of the most beloved romantic male protagonists in literature for us. And when I started to write, one of the things that I was perpetually coming up against was the likability of female protagonists. So it was very obvious to me that when I was going to write something that examined privilege of our time, I had to also try to examine if I could write a female version of someone who owns their privilege with so much comfort, and is a woman, and so obviously when we first meet her, is comes across as a jerk, as does Darcy. And so Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors is gender flipped. So Trisha, who is Mr. Darcy in this story, was not going to have male privilege, and she was going to be brown, because this is an immigrant Indian family. But other than that, I literally made a list of everything that gives you a leg up. And she has a genius level brain, she has a loving family, she has generational wealth, she great educational institutions, living in in one of the in terms of neighborhoods, one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the country. All of those things that automatically give you a leg up, she was going to have. And what it has done for her, which is, I think, to me, the quintessential Darcy problem, is that while she wants to make the best of it, and her intentions are fabulous, what she has not cultivated up until we meet her in the book is a lens of empathy. Because she uses her good intentions as an excuse for not developing that lens of empathy. And the journey of her journey across the book is not like I see happen across so many female protagonists. When I was growing up, it isn't she never apologizes for the gifts she has. That was not breaking her down in that way, was not the answer. She maintains her her sense of self-worth, but what she gains is a lens of empathy, and that changes everything. And so to me, that was the lesson that I learned from Pride and Prejudice. And so that's kind of thematically where I went with that. With Persuasion, it was quite simply this culture of this culture that I grew up in, was a culture of mistakes being irredeemable. So we were raised a little bit and maybe not overtly, but certainly under the surface, one of the running themes of my childhood was the fear of slipping up, the fear of making a mistake. You could, if you didn't study hard enough and didn't get into the best college, your chance was done, right? If you got involved with the wrong kind of guy and your reputation was forsaken, there was no coming back from that. So every mistake, so you had to make choices from a place of fear, that basically said if you made a mistake, that was it, that was your one chance. And when I read Persuasion, the thing that kind of came up for me in that book was the fact that when you're young, you can make a mistake, and that's not the end of it. You will always have a second chance, but that second chance comes with growth. That the second chance comes with changing the thing that kept you from making the right choice in the first place. So it gave me this freedom to make mistakes and to still have hope that that things could be fixed, that what I wanted was not going to forever be kept from me just because I made one mistake. So to me, that was the heart of Persuasion. And of course, I always wanted to be loved like that, like who doesn't? But having said that, that was the heart of it for me. And so in Recipe for Persuasion, I think that's what it is. It is being influenced by your surroundings, and coming at your choices from a place of fear, because you're buying the fear that's being sold to you, that your life can only be a certain way if you follow the rules set up by those who are supposed to have your best interest at heart. And Recipe for Persuasion, the plot is Ashna Raje is a girl who has been taught that she can, uh, that she has to live life a certain way, and she buys into it. And then there are events in her life that kind of make her believe that she can't make the choice she wants to make, and so she loses the great love of her life. And then 10 years later, they meet again. So this is kind of, um uh, it's the book is set on a Food Network show. So also, Pride and Prejudice, DJ, who is Lizzie Bennett, is a chef. And so obviously there's a whole thing going on with me personally and food, which we can we can talk about during Q&A. But the book is set on a show called Cooking with the Stars, which is like Dancing with the Stars, but with food. And Ashna is a chef. She's trying to save her father's restaurant. So there is this whole thematic thing that also times turn, right? Your place in society isn't quite as as definitive as you would like it to be. And choices that you made based on the reality of one time, the reality itself shifts, and so your choices have to be based on things other than um, you know finances and a person's place in the social ladder, which is again very much a thing that I learned from Persuasion. And so her position in life has flipped, and Rico, who is Frederico Silva, who is my Captain Wentworth, he has gone on to become a football, or what we call in America, a soccer player for Manchester United, and he's a World Cup winning, extremely successful football player internationally, and he's just retired, and he's kind of back in the Bay Area to get closure and to kind of put to rest this torch he's been carrying. And he works his way into this show where he's the celebrity and she's the chef. So it has to do with power, and how that balance can shift over time. So those were kind of the the pieces that led to this book. There was also another piece of it, because I was examining what what we're allowed to do, the choices we are allowed to make. And I think Anne Elliot again is a even as a young person, is able to um, see worth and see character under everything she's supposed to see, the lens of social superiority. She's able to see, she's just not able to follow through because she doesn't believe she has the power to do that, or she doesn't feel capable of making that choice or brave enough to make that choice, because obviously there are other things happening in her life, and Ashna is very much like that. Now, one of the other things that was important, I think, in the stories I was hearing when I was growing up, was this idea that, which is very much, I think, true in Persuasion. There was a very constant plot in Bollywood films where a young woman is in love with a man, and her family swoops in and says that, oh, this is not the guy for you, he is not worthy of you, and so we are going to get you married off to this other person. And the way that plot always plays out is that the woman, the woman decides that this is the life I am now stuck with, and even though I did not choose this person for me, I'm going to make the best out of it. And then what she learns through the story, by the end of the story, is that um, that this person turns out to be great, and she ends up finding happiness. And when I was again, when I was a young girl, that felt like such what is the word I'm looking for, that just felt like such rubbish, that nonsense that I was being fed. I was it was like, yes, but she didn't choose him. So what you're telling women is that others know what's best for them, right? And if you put your head down and take whatever you're forced to choose, that you're going to find happiness ultimately. And it really bothered me that that was the story. And so there's a dual line story in my Persuasion, which is Ashna and Ashna's mother, who was forced into a marriage when she was by her father, who didn't think the person she was in love with was of their social class, etc. And she's forced into this marriage, and she says, I refuse to put my head down and take it, and I refuse to make lemonade out of these lemons. And she fights. And then women are constantly trained, or used to be, that if you do that, if you fight for your own desires, then there's collateral damage on your family and your children. That's collateral damage. And so Ashna is actually collateral damage. And I wanted to kind of overlap those two stories, where what happens when a woman chooses to not acquiesce, and there is collateral damage. But what is the way that you can actually walk through that fire of collateral damage, and what happens when you come out on the other side? And so that kind of was that is what Recipe for Persuasion is. And I know there are questions, and I'm going to come back and look at it, and if there's something that needs to be answered immediately, I'm hoping Eric or Inger or someone will pop their head in and tell me to. Hi, Inger.
Well, hey, we could go ahead and start asking a few questions, unless was there more you wanted to present right now initially?
I did want to quickly talk about In Sense and Sensibility and Emma Project, and it'll be another 5 minutes. I'll talk really fast.
Oh, no, that's not the idea. Take your time.
No, it's so I did want to go through all four of them, and I think it's so unless there is a question that specifically relates to what I've said thus far, we could just finish up with all four. Does that work?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So so in Sense and Sensibility, Sense and Sensibility, in my opinion, the basic conflict, the central conflict, translates the least well, if that is a if I may use a poetic license. But because the basic conflict of Sense and Sensibility is a man who is unable to break a promise because it would deem him you know ignoble, or it would destroy his character in the eyes of society, right? He has So here is Edward Ferrars, who has made a promise um to 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 someone in his in his childish um first flush of infatuation, and now he can't get out of it without being seen universally and in his own eyes as as a person not worthy of respect. And that's not the world we live in anymore, right? We live in a world that's almost completely out, not in the business of taboos anymore. And most certainly, I joke, but it's like, if you don't like the way your spouse sneezes and you leave them, nobody is going to pass a character judgment on you that is, in any way meaningful to you. And so that base conflict kind of doesn't translate into today's world. So that was one of the things I kind of wanted to look at, um, was what is it today that would I mean, we do live in a culture where getting cancelled is not hard to do. But having said that, what are the things, right? What is it in the public realm that can destroy you, but not so much destroy you publicly, but in your own eyes? Because I think Edward Ferris's thing is more being falling in his own eyes is the thing he doesn't want to do. And so what is the thing? So the story here is the oldest of the Raje siblings, Yash Raje, is running for. So this series kind of gets kicks off when the oldest son in this politically ambitious Indian American family, who are like the Indian Kennedys, their oldest son is running for California governor. So in the first book, he announces his candidacy, and we go through the election, and in the last book is just after the election has happened. So in Sense and Sensibility, which is Yash's story, I kind of wanted to a person in the public eye, what sort of thing would be destructive to him. But more than that, I think the part of the Edward Ferris journey, which is somebody who has been bred to be someone. He carries the expectations. Now Edward Ferris carries the expectations of his family. And I mean, there's a kind of tongue-in-cheekness with which I think Jane Austen tells that story, where where even as she's telling it, it's like, okay, does it really matter what your mother expects from you? But in Yash's case, he is actually carrying the dreams of an entire of all the people who believe in him, of an entire community, all of that on his shoulders. And what does that actually mean? How much of that is your dream? How much of that is someone else's dream? And reconciling what you really want for yourself, and the path that's been laid out for you by the world. And that is, I think, to me, that was Edward Ferris's journey, was finding out what his what is his to want, and what is what he's taken on in terms of expectations from those around him. So that kind of is was where I was going with Sense and Sensibility. And of course, what is, even in today's day and age, what is nobility? What makes us what makes us worthy in our own eyes, was where I was going with that. And finally, I think Emma was, to me, what Emma is really about. And the lesson from Emma for me was, essentially, it is this person who has more and therefore believes she knows more. So it really is it is in Jane Austen's, I think, search for trying to and I do think she was exploring privilege and class. And I think that this was her real, like, wink nod to that. Here is a here's a young woman who basically has everything anyone would ever want, and she's bored, and she finds a charity case. And so it really is about charity. And we live in a world, I think, today, with the GoFundMe's, and with constantly being bombarded with the pain of others, and being given the easy out of of using our money to make ourselves feel better, and of somehow giving us a free pass, by for having more, by doing by checkboxing help. And then there is this whole world we live in, where there is where billionaires are pledging their entire all of their wealth to change the world as they want. And is that as simple, again, as just that? Because we're allowing, again, the wealthy to make decisions and choices for the haves, to make decisions and choices for the have nots. So Emma Project for me was really about that angle. And it's these two wealthy children, wealthy kids. And this also is a gender flip. So it is she is Mr. Knightley, and he's the youngest of the Rajes siblings. And I will actually, when I read a piece, you'll know kind of what I'm talking about. And they're both fighting for funding, but I mean, it's basically people who have everything and are trying to change the world, who have to kind of question, why am I doing this, and what does it mean? Is it where is this coming from, and what it means in our world today? So that's, we can go to questions. That's
Thank you so much. That was lovely.
I talked fast.
You have a lot to say.
Always.
Well, Sonali, thank you so much for your talk. I'm wondering if you maybe want to show us some photos that you took with your books at Jane Austen's house.
Yes, I had a chance to. Oh, there it is. And there's a typo in there, which is so terrible. And I'm sure all of you have already noticed it. It's A instead of Anne. And I'm like, what did I do? But anyway, so this was me visiting Chatham House in Hampshire, in England, in 2019, just before our world changed. And it was, I mean, I could give a 1 hour talk on what the feeling of standing in her room was like, and what, even looking at a lock of her hair was like, and just walking in those footsteps was like. But yeah, here is like, they you can make little lavender pouches, and the like. And of course, that's me dressed up in my in my little Regency cape, or whatever it's called. As I said, I'm not a scholar, so forgive me.
Thank you. And thank you for posting all of these beautiful.
So that actually, believe it or not, is the little desk and chair on which she did all her writing, which is which is incredible. The scale of things is incredible. And I'm usually of a rule follower, and it says do not touch, but I touched it. I had to. And that's the persuasion. I was kind of thinking about marketing, but they had a stamp. So, whoever was doing the marketing, unless that's a later stamp. But I had some of the original ads, which I don't have in here, like the original newspaper announcements for some of her books, which was, the social media of the time, I guess. So. And that's the church where she went to Mass, I think, the last 10 years of her life, which is just the most incredible thing. And they have a statue of her just outside.
Wonderful.
All right. So please post your questions in the chat. You can also email them And we'll have a banner pop up on the screen with our email address. You can email questions to us, and we'll spend the next part of this presentation going through some audience questions. I kind of wanted to start while people are posting their questions. I wanted to start with a question of my own for you, Sonali. One of my favorite parts of your presentation tonight has you mentioned when talking about Recipe for Persuasion, this idea that your place in society isn't quite as definitive as you think. And I found that to be a really powerful sentiment that also kind of works through the rest of your series as well. And I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit more on how you see that theme maybe in other books besides Recipe for Persuasion.
It's a great question, and it was, I think, something that really kind of spoke to me as a child. And I'll tell you a really silly story my dad would tell when I was little that really fits in with this. And it was, this the two sisters who are, who are married off to completely, one is married off to a very wealthy man, and one is married off to a commoner. And every single time they're invited to back to their parents' house and stuff, they're treated very differently. And then the one who's married to a poor man, the husband ends up getting into good business or whatever, and makes a whole lot of money. And she's visiting her parents' home, and everybody's treating her really well. And there is, where she used to be fed like one roti and yogurt, there's like this feast laid out and that sort of thing. And what she does is, when she sits down to eat, she takes off all her jewelry, the bangles and the diamonds, and she places them on her chair. And um and 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 the point of that is that you're not feeding me, you're feeding, you're not being kind and hospitable to me, you're being kind and hospitable to the wealth that I now have. And it always kind of, and it was kind of part of that, right, which is that success, especially in terms of wealth, is transient, and it has nothing to do with who you are. And I think that it's not even just the Raje books. I think it is across the board, because I'm fascinated by this. Not as simple as good and evil, in terms of, again, what someone else sees. But I think self-worth has to do with loving yourself, right? And so every one of these books, I think, is a journey for every one of these characters, in the original and in my books, is coming to terms with who you are and fully accepting that, right? I mean, even the joke that Lizzie Bennet makes, in Pride and Prejudice, where she's like, maybe I fell in love with him when I, saw Pemberley for the first time. That's kind of, just being okay with us, with, with our, with our greed and our kindness and all of those pieces of us, right, which have very little to do with anything else but really accepting who you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Susan, do you have a question, or should I go?
Yes, I do have a question. Sonali, I've just been rereading these, and they are really wonderful. I almost didn't get here on time because I was sitting on the porch rereading Incense and Sensibility. And I'm wondering, especially from the perspective of the Emma Project, where we see somewhat more of some of the characters who we've followed pretty intensively in the first three novels, whether you had a sense of changes in who your characters were as the series continued, or if you thought about how to continue that sense of necessary growth that you were just talking about.
So I did, and I saw that somebody, I haven't had a chance to look at the questions, but somebody also, I think, asked if I knew when I started out that there were going to be these 4 books.
Yes.
So I absolutely did. It was always going to be. I think that was kind of a requirement even when when I went to my publisher, and at one point there was some talk about, can we make it a trilogy because trilogies do better. I'm like, you don't understand. It does not matter how they do. Of course it matters, but really it is incredibly important for me to tell these 4 stories exactly the way that I envision them. So that piece I did know. But that's a really interesting question, because Yash in Sense and Sensibility, until we get to In Sense and Sensibility, he is this I think he's larger than life even in Sense and Sensibility. But really what we're seeing of him in the first 2 books is him through the eyes of others, right? Him through the eyes of sisters who idolize him, and him through the eyes of parents who want him to fulfill all these dreams. A public who sees somebody who is going to finally be that politician who will be different from all other politicians, and that whole thing. So he is always seen from the outside as someone who totally has everything together. And then we enter his book and we see that he is an absolute emotional mess, right? And he isn't, but that one, at the start of that book is an assassination attempt, where one of his bodyguards, who is also his friend, gets pretty critically hurt, and it completely tumbles everything. It's that one trigger, and everything he's been repressing just boom comes out, right? So we see Yash through that book as pretty much an emotional mess, right? Until he figures out a way to get it right. So even as I was writing him from other people's perspectives, I kind of knew that he isn't what everybody is seeing him as. And I think that is absolutely true and I think that's that's the journeys. In fact, my editor had to keep on in the initial books say, this is not Yash's book, and this is not Ashna's book. So you have to kind of focus on the central story for each book, and not kind of jump ahead and go off into everything Ashna is. I had like a scene where I describe her, and my editor said that only makes sense because she's already this formed person in your head, but your readers don't know that yet. And so a lot of it was that. And even and the same thing is true of Vansh, where he seems, and again, it's so much, I think, of this book of these books and all the books I write is it is societal expectation versus personal freedom to be who you are. And I think that is my essential life journey, right? Everything I'm expected to be for everyone, and I was raised to be the perfect mother, perfect wife, domestic goddess, all of that. Like, I was my self-worth was so deeply tied to it that my whole life has been trying to break conditioning, without losing all the lovely things that come into your life when you build in that way, right? And so it's always that tightrope walk between personal freedom and societal expectations. And I think that every one of my characters does that same walk. And again, we've seen Vansh and Naina as completely different people until Naina is literally the villain in Sense and Sensibility. And after you've read the Emma Project, and you go back and look at Sense and Sensibility, you see all of her actions in a different way, because that's exactly, I think, what life is, right? Until we know the full story, um, all our opinions are just judgments, and they don't mean anything.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And one of the things that I'll just add is, today, as I was reading In Sense and Sensibility, and Yash thinks that Trisha is the best person at standing up to their father. I thought, whoa, he doesn't know the kind of difficulty she was having in Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors. So that I think you do a really wonderful job of getting that kind of difference between the interior world of a character and the exterior, and even the exterior world of a character and what the reader knows as well. It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm going to pick up on something that both Charlene and Joe have asked here. So Charlene asks about whether you have come up with a family take on Mansfield Park, and Joe asks about Northanger Abbey as well. Curious what you think.
Honestly, I didn't read them growing up, and I have no emotional connection to them. And I know that there are a lot of people who, want to bang my head against a wall for that, but I apologize. So the answer is no.
Maybe you need to develop the emotional connection. And because I will just add, I have a friend who wanted me to say that she is absolutely going to die if there are no more novels in this series. So.
Oh my God, I love your friend. I love your friend. Okay, maybe. Let me think about it. But no, this was just such a complete thing in my head. It was just a thing that has sat inside me for so long that I just kind of wanted it. It was this vision, and I'll tell you, as a writer, it just, and anybody who's written, when you think of a book, it's like two lines, right, of this idea with like hundreds of lines in your perception that's in there, but to translate that into words and to actually see that happen and to do that is the most incredibly satisfying thing. But also you're almost kind of flummoxed that you could do it. Like when I finished Pride and Prejudice, I had wanted to do so many things with that book, and and when I read it, like I am incredibly proud of it. For I know it's not perfect, and I know I'm not the world's best writer, not even by a long shot, but I'm saying simply in terms of setting out to do something and doing it, like I just had such a strong vision that I feel completely satisfied in how it is. So and anybody who lived with me through those 5 years, 6 years that I was writing these books, will tell you that it wasn't, it was complete chaos inside my head and outside. But having said that, it's just I'm so satisfied with where these books are, that I think that's the real thing, that I kind of have purged it completely from within myself.
Mhm.
Eric?
Yeah, all right. So we have another question from the audience from Debbie Van Sickle. I'm going to show this on the screen. How have your books been received outside the US? Are they being read by young people the way you read Austen's books when you were quite young?
So I love that question. They are. I think they're read in India as well. Those are the two, I think. Other than Canada, Australia, that sort of thing. They are, and I get. I think the thing I had never thought of it in this way, because I had always thought of it from my own perspective. Like, this is something I want to do, this is homage I want to pay, this is my relationship with Austen. And I'll tell you, I stood in her room, and I remember just being unable to stop the tears, because that connection across time was so intense for me. And that moment of standing in a place that she had stood in was just so intense for me, right? I mean, it's really hard for me even to explain it. But you know but having said that, I think that I'm Laurie's saying something, and I'm trying to read that, and I totally lost my stream of thought. Please remind me what I was talking about. This is my 50-year-old brain.
Oh, just how your books have been received internationally.
Thank you. I know. This is like, okay. And so I was actually at I had always thought of it as me outward, right? Like from inside me outward. And I was at a signing, and a younger person stopped by at my table and said, it's really incredible that I would never have read Pride and Prejudice, simply because I've tried it a few times, and which is incomprehensible to most of us on this call, that that somebody would start reading it, and just the pacing, the language, whatever the reasons are, it kind of isn't, you're not able to get into it. And so this is a way that you're reacquainting a generation who was removed from those stories with those stories. And I had never thought of it that way, and I was like, okay, that that is so true. But there's also so yes, I think, and I get get emails all the time from, I think, from people who grew up with these stories, um where they feel like they it was reading about someone else and yet not, and this kind of seeing themselves in that story is somehow powerful.
Mhm.
Thank you for helping me out with that.
Susan?
Yeah, you said that you would like to talk more about food, and I think we would like to hear more about food in
Here's a
your life.
comment that kind of relates to it too.
Ah, yes, that the story in Recipe for Persuasion was so emotionally powerful, and I think that cooking show format was really fascinating.
Yeah, and it there was a few ways in which the cooking show happened, but also that whole Rico being a sportsman and stuff was sorry, I think I'm just getting over a virus. But the thing with I think Captain Wentworth is that his base his basic character is warrior, right? I mean, he is he's a military man, right? And so I didn't I wasn't going I didn't think that the things that brought to his character, um his work brought to his character, would translate today for me if I had written there's, of course, I'm thinking all these other things about what the British Navy means as someone who grew up in a colonized country, and I'm kind of not going there, but keeping the lens in Jane Austen's world. I think, so I wanted someone who had that kind of, you know, warrior mentality. And I
Mhm.
think that, and that respect of the world because of it, because back then, as a naval officer, you were bringing so much wealth into England that you were kind of idolized for it too, and all of that. And so, so as a person who, who is who is an athlete in today's world, I felt like a lot of that was happening. That kind of is where Rico comes from, which is coming back to the food thing. Um, there are even in, I think, the Jane Austen stories, she uses food and how stacked a table is, who cooks, who doesn't, all of that, to identify again social
Mm.
social placement. For me, I think food is an incredibly powerful tool. Again, in immigrant life, it takes on, because food recreates home, right? And food kind of is currency we almost use to build world from scratch, as immigrants. So personally, my stories, food takes on, um becomes a device for connection in so many ways. So this is again true in my real life. It is, I migrated as a young adult. I have, built family out of friends, as all, immigrants do. I've, it's one generation deep in terms of home and community for our children. So food forms such a part of so many of these things that it obviously always, shows up in my books as as that, as cement, as communication, as nurturing, as in Ashna's case, in fact. So for DJ in Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, food is how he knows how to communicate, right? Food is how he learns people, how he reaches out to them. So it's intrinsically something that is a thing of connection and happiness for him. With Ashna, it's the exact opposite, right? It is a thing that meant something to a person who has caused a great amount of trauma in her life, which is her father. It was a thing, his, her, to her father, food was a way to, to again show class and to show largesse, and that sort of thing. It was a way to show refinement, right? I understand caviar, you don't, or whatever, right? That whole, it was such an ugly thing for her growing up. Plus, it was a thing she felt pushed into, having no connection with it at all. So it's really a thing of trauma, and when she um gets into this this situation of this show with Rico, it is such a time of healing, where they're able to use also, between culturally, that the reason that she's kind of been told he is different from you, right? He's from a different, he's not anything like us. And when so much of their food has overlap, and this is again an
Mhm.
interesting tidbit. Brazil, a Portuguese colony, and Goa in India, a Portuguese colony. So much of, and my family in Maharashtra is, very is connected to Goa. My grandmother is from there, and so many of our words for food, pao for bread, kaju for cashews, so much of it is the same across Brazilian culture and ours. And so they kind of discover that oneness through food, which again, ironically, has has to do with colonization. But but the things he's grown up eating and the things she's grown up eating in slightly different forms, right? And how they bring those things together. So it becomes a thing. It goes from being a thing of trauma for her to being a thing of healing, and that I think reflects how their relationship comes back from a place of being traumatic to a place of having a second chance.
Do you think that, building on that idea, do you think that that the senses involved with eating, especially smell and taste, have the capacity to elicit memory more than the other senses?
Absolutely. In fact, we kind of, one of the craft classes that we do, in using your five senses in eating. I mean, in writing, that is actually one of the, it's a taste is very much a memory sense. And so many, because I mean, all of us have foods that, harken to our childhood, right? And good memories, bad memories. There's a particular kind of holiday meal feeling you get in the pit of your stomach, that comes from like a feeling rather than even a taste, right? Like that sense of being full and surrounded by family, for people for whom it was good. And then I don't know if any of you have watched The Bear.
Yes.
But there is, I mean, I think that entire 2 season show, there is one episode of a holiday family dinner that literally is one of the most powerful pieces of storytelling that I have watched in a long, long time. And I will never think of, holiday meals as only comforting for everyone after that. So it again, it is, it's a memory of stress. So I think it's a sense memory, but actually just deeper than even memory, right? It is actually at like a at a subconscious level, that food reminds us of things, and tastes remind us of things, and gathering around meals, has so much to do with um a sense of how we feel. So it's not even just memory, it is like a sensation that's beyond the senses also.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I have one more question for you, and maybe there's other questions still coming in from the audience. The you are writing other novels outside of the Rajes series, and I'm wondering how Austen will stick with you in your other projects. Like, what lasting influence will this writer have on your career as a writer?
I mean, again, everything, right? When I'm the basic thing is who I am, has to do with what I learned from her books. So those are, I mean, I say that what I set out to do with those books I did, but does that mean I completely understand privilege in our world today? Do I absolutely not. Like, there's so much more exploring still to do, and those were the stories that I was built on. So I fall back into those scenes and that way of so there's, in fact, I think across the board my books have kind of obvious nods also to to these books, very much so.
Let's not forget this second part of Erna's question about the movie option. I think everybody wants to know about whether there's a movie option.
There is a movie option, yes.
Can you tell us more?
I actually cannot, because an option is an option. So I need everybody to send really good good vibes that option will mean development. But again, I feel like these books are absolutely ripe for screen adaptation. So I hope this option works out. Otherwise, they will. I genuinely believe that there will be something someday, because how can there not, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, Susan.
Absolutely. Yeah, we haven't talked at all about the character of Esha, the oldest of the cousins. And as I was rereading the Emma Project, I was just so fascinated by that. And I don't want you to, spoil anything for people, but I was wondering about whether myth was one of the things that fascinated you as a child, since you seem to be bringing almost a magical realist element into the series with that character.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. Again, being able to kind of fold her story into the Emma Project. And I'll, quickly do an aside and say that, the Jane Fairfax, Frank Churchill thing that happens in Emma is this relationship that uses the central relationship to hide behind. And I kind of loved that little connection, which kind of allowed me to bring Aisha's story into this, where Vansh's confidence that everybody just, how can someone not love him? It kind of helps Sid and Aisha. So that was kind of my little nod to that that very subtle yet strong piece of almost genius level piece of work that Austen does in Emma, that I love. But again, one of the things, because because the spine of this series was Yash's campaign, which kind of rested on this idea that something is ordained, or something, where this family believes that this is what he was born for and this is going to happen, right? They have put that on his shoulders from the day he is born. And that is strengthened by something like a prophecy, because as soon as that makes, somehow made that conviction stronger, right? Because of what Eva is able to do. And kind of, so that was that had something to do with that not only is this a thing everybody believes Yash will do, but they believe that it's part of a preordained prophecy, because Isha has predicted it. And so some of it was that. And again, being Indian, I'm constantly if I could tell you the times when my mom is like, this astrologer said to me, if my kids are going through stuff, this astrologer has said that by May next year, everything's going to be okay with your daughter, kind of thing. And there's like complete faith in that thing. And, and it's, I could tell you a million stories where it is both been true and not. So again, it's very much part, I think, of life as I see it. And I think across my books there's always that something that is outside of our understanding. And I think that magical realism is again a label, and I love it, but I do believe that there is in our day-to-day life, how we end up meeting each other, what specifically, like we all have those stories, like, can you believe, who would have thought, and that's, I think that magic is very much a real, like, we can call it magic or serendipity, or like just coincidence, if you're a cynical old crone. but but I think that that absolutely there's like a base belief that I have, and of course Asia's story is more complicated than that for me, because again, the the pressure of having to be right, and the pressure to be trusted to that level, right, where your word is considered a prophecy, and what that, when that goes away, what happens, and all of that, like I loved playing with that.
Mhm.
Sonali, I wonder if we could close with the reading that I think you had prepared for us. I almost forgot to ask about it. Would you treat us with that?
I would love to. Thank you so much. And everybody has been so kind. So I hope this is not too long, but because I talked about, oh boy, maybe I should start a little. Well, anyway, if you get bored, you might have to drop off. But it is, this is kind of the piece where, one of the things I love about Knightley and Emma in the original is the comfort of each other, right? Because they've known each other their whole life, their family, all of that, and Nana and Vansh are that. Now they're gender flipped. She is, she's the Knightley and he's not, and also where the Emma project, where the title kind of comes in. And all right, so I do warn you that this might be a little bit long, but that's the scene. They're both, as I said, fighting for the same funding, and there's a billionaire who is kind of playing them against each other for his benefit. Surprise, surprise. But she is calling him because she's really upset about the possibility of losing funding for her work, and so he's been ignoring her calls after she finds out, and she sends him a text. So it starts, call me right now because I know where to find you, she texted Vansh. Her phone rang almost immediately. It was a FaceTime call. She was at her desk working, so she had to run to the hallway and check herself in the mirror. She pulled off the crab clip holding back her hair and fluffed it. God, she hated video calls. Well, good morning to you too, the brat said as soon as she answered, tone all sunny, as though he were not trying to steal her endowment. Wait, was he shirtless? What do you think you're doing? At this very moment, eating chocolate? 89% cacao, he chewed. Dear God, he was eating chocolate, shirtless, in bed. You're in bed, eating chocolate. When tongue-tied, say the most obvious thing. I often eat chocolate after I brush my teeth. There's something about how the mint makes the chocolate taste. From the way his eyes got all dreamy, it had to taste pretty darned good. How was it okay for a man to have eyes like this? There were enough lashes lining the dark caramel brown that he probably needed to brush them a few times a day to take out the tangles. They were even twisted together and flipping around in all directions like his hair. This was why Naina never video called people. The camera zoomed in on all sorts of details you didn't have to deal with when the whole person was present and not just their face 10 inches from yours. "There's something very wrong with you," she said, looking at the contrast between their faces on the screen. She didn't mean things like unfair lashes and shiny chocolate stained lips that looked like they'd been pumped full of fillers. She meant her overworked scowl, which made her look like a frustrated witch, versus his self indulgent smile, which made him look like a joyful angel. If that wasn't technology bastardizing facts, she didn't know what was. "Can you please put a shirt on?" She hated that she sounded like a scolding auntie. Why? He looked genuinely confused when he looked down at himself, which made the camera slide down his chest. And, well, what the hell? He was manscaped and glossy, and his muscles were cut in places where she'd never seen muscles cut before. At least not this close up, and not outside of TV commercials and movies. When had he gotten a tattoo? Did his mom know? Okay, enough of this. Enough. "You've been ignoring my calls and you're still in bed." He stopped studying his own body and brought his eyes back to the camera. "Did we have an appointment? Were we supposed to meet this morning?" He scratched the back of his head. Who actually scratched the back of their head when they thought hard? Bad actors, that's who. "Put on a damn shirt." She could not, would not be auntie enough to say it again. First, it's past noon. So if we were supposed to meet this morning, it's already too late. Second, responsible adults don't wake up in the middle of the day. Third, responsible adults don't smear chocolate on their teeth after they've cleaned them. It kind of defeats the purpose of the act of teeth brushing. They also don't call women while shirtless, unless, of course, they thought of the women as not being women. And finally, you don't steal a friend's work. It's just not something you do. "Oof," he said, his tone miffed. "Say less. Can we not speak Gen Z, please? I don't know what that means." He laughed in the most self-satisfied way. "You're so intense in the morning, Nightlina. Which side of bed did you wake up on?" "I don't remember. It was 7 hours ago." She made every effort not to raise her voice. "Because it's Monday morning and I have a job that involved bettering thousands of lives, thank you very much." Instead of getting out of bed, he sank back into his fluffy white pillows. "You sound bitter. Not a good look." "Wow. Are you about to ask me to smile more?" "As a committed feminist, I resent that accusation," he said lazily. "It's a gorgeous thing when you smile, but you should smile only when you damn well feel like it. What I meant was, you're the smartest, most selfless person I know, and bitterness is at odds with your true nature." He sounded like the Buddha, and it got on Nana's last nerve. "Stop trying to be charming. I've known you since you were in diapers. The point is, I will not let you steal my funding, not when I've worked decades for it, not when you don't even have a project to fund." "I wish you'd stop calling it stealing. That's seriously offensive." "I've never stolen a thing in my life," he grinned. And the lighting, combined with his unshaven jaw, multiplied his dimples manifold. Good thing she knew exactly how much he would weaponize those dimples. She remembered his unleashing them on all the aunties and melting them into puddles to get away with everything, from extra cake to at parties to getting them to double their donations to his school fundraiser. Although it is true that I have been accused of stealing many a heart. She made a growling sound, and it made her feel like she was in a theatrical farce, one populated entirely by old, bitter ladies. "What's offensive is that you didn't say to Mehta, 'I appreciate your social ladder climbing, name dropping need to work with me, but Nana actually does important, life changing work, and I would rather die than take even a penny away from it.'" For the first time, his lazy demeanor slipped, and he sat up a little bit straighter. "You think the only reason Mehta wants to work with me is because of my last name?" For the first time, she was glad this was a video call, because she didn't have to answer. She just had to raise a brow. He looked wounded, but she didn't buy it, not for 1 second. If that's true, then what does that say about why you got funding last year, Nightlina, and not the year before that? How dare he? Don't even think about saying what you're about to say next, she warned. He ignored her warning. So you're allowed to dismiss me and insult me, but I'm supposed to let you be an ostrich at my expense? I am not being an ostrich. I hear you loud and clear. You just suggested that I only got the funding because Yash was leading in the polls and I was with him. Did he have any idea how long and hard she had worked on this? Her entire adult life had revolved around her work, only to disprove your theory that Jiggy Wiggy is offering me the funding because Yash is my brother. He sounded placating, and for some reason, that made Naina even angrier. Must be nice to be this clueless. Do you genuinely believe that those two things have any sort of equivalency? Of course they do. I'm not saying it's fair, but if you want to claim that one is true, then the other has to be. He had the gall to look like it hurt him to say it. Vansh, I'm not doing this with you right now. All I need from you is for you to call Mehta and tell him that you are not interested. Surely he couldn't be arrogant enough to think she'd let him get away with anything else. I can't do that. Aren't you at least going to ask me why I'm still in bed? Do you ever get out of bed before noon? I'm not dignifying that with an answer, but I was checking hurry into a hotel. Your sex life is none of my concern and it only makes things worse. Wow, you really have no respect for me, do you? You're right, my sex life is not your concern. If it were, you'd know it never makes anything worse. Of course, he had to grin at that. Hari is one of the guys who worked on Yash's campaign, and I was checking him into a hotel. What? Are you talking about Yash's statistics guy? Why were you checking him into a hotel? Ah, so now you're interested. No, I'm really not. She had less than zero interest in anything to do with Yash's campaign. But if it will get you to the point where you call Jiggy and refuse his offer because you don't need it faster, then let's get on with it. He was sitting up now and getting out of bed, and she really wished he would put on some damn clothes because he'd propped the phone on his nightstand, and she could now see all the way down to his low slung pajamas, which were red with white polka dots. And the muscle cuts on muscle cuts situation was not restricted to the upper half of his torso. Vansh! He turned to the phone, and it was like one of those Da Vinci Vitruvian man animations of muscles in motion. Nana, I'm not going to refuse the funding because you just gave me an idea. Thank you. The urge to sink her face into her hands warred with the urge to shake him. I'm shuddering here. Dirty girl, you're making me feel naked. Since when was it okay for him to talk to her as though she were one of his revolving door girlfriends? You are naked, but I'm shuddering in fear of your idea. He grinned with such self satisfaction. She couldn't tell if it was because he'd made her explain herself like a flustered girl or because he was just thrilled with himself in general. I thought you'd be happy that I'm agreeing with you. It would be totes wrong for me to take the funding without a project, but I do have a project. Well, spit it out. I don't have all day. His brows drew together and his lips pursed, making his dimples dig deep. Why would I tell you if you're already dismissing it? Actually, even you couldn't dismiss it. Even you have to agree that homelessness is one of our greatest challenges in California. Her groan came from her toes and burst forth with all the force of someone who really needed a break. Please, could she please catch a break? What does Hari have to do with homelessness? Well, I'm not at liberty to tell you. Actually, I need you to promise not to tell anyone about this conversation. Who did he think she was close enough to that she could tell them she talked to Vansh while he was half naked about that asswipe Mehta holding her funding over her head like a bone for a dog? It was too humiliating to share even with herself. I'm hardly going to run around telling people you were able to steal my endowment so easily. Do you have any idea how infuriating this is, not to mention humiliating? Do you have any idea how condescending you're being right now? You're treating me like a child. I don't appreciate it. He was a damn child. Have you heard of Emma? DJ's sister Emma Kane, the hot artist? No, it's a book. The one DJ's sister was named after. Trisha's boyfriend DJ's name was Darcy James and his sister's name was Emma. Evidently, their mother had been a big Jane Austen fan. By Jane Austen. Isn't Jane Austen that Darcy chick? Isn't he the one that Brit actor played who all the aunties were gaga over? Colin Farrell? Nana did it. She rubbed her hand across her face like someone who needed to erase this entire conversation from existence. So, in the book Emma, which has nothing to do with Darcy, who is from Pride and Prejudice, Emma is an overindulged, albeit well-meaning brat who is looking for matchmaking projects so she can feel good about herself while filling all that empty time she has on her hands. He pressed a fist against whatever tattoo was emblazoned across his left peg. Young lady, are you accusing me of matchmaking? He said in a bad British accent, sort of voice. She should not smile because this was not a joke. No, I'm accusing you of looking for projects so you can feel good about yourself and relieve your boredom. He picked the phone up from the nightstand and held it up. He was pouting and blinking rapidly, but his eyes shone with wounded anger. Oh, good gosh, I think you might have had a breakthrough on my behalf or something. How had she found his habit of constantly doing voices amusing before this? And why on earth did she feel like such a jerk suddenly? All I'm saying is that my work is important to me, but it's also vital to a lot of women who need it. Mine is too, and you're wrong. This project is important. What project? This is not a game, Vansh. I know it's not. I need to figure out the details, but letting Mehta's millions help the homeless in our city seems important too. Figure out the details? Don't you see? What you're talking about is an Emma project. It's vanity. It's looking for ways to play with people's lives out of ennui. No, it isn't. Now he looked really angry. I can't believe this is what you think of me. You haven't even heard what it is. Fine. Tell me then. A smile spread across his lips, but his eyes stayed angry. He blinked, a slow, deliberately vapid blink. Didn't you hear me? I think your Emma's going to, tackle homelessness in San Francisco. He used a high pitched voice that was quite frankly offensive to every woman alive. And with that, he hung up, and Nana had not a clue how much of what he'd said was meant to be facetious and how much was going to screw up her life.
Thank you so much, Sonali. That was a wonderful reading. And I hope you take a moment to look at the comments and see the thanks that are kind of pouring in. And if you're in the audience tonight, thank you so much for tuning in as well. We've had a blast on this first episode of this season of Jane Austen and Company. Please stick around for 2 more minutes as we want to share a few bits of information about what lies ahead for our series. First, we want to share the URL to Sonali's personal website so that you can find her contact information, her social media handles, and information about her most recent publications. If this series sparks your interest, we heartily recommend Sonali's most recent book, Lies and Other Love Languages, which was published just over a month ago. It's an emotional story of 3 women navigating ugly truths and safe lies with only love to guide them on a journey of motherhood, friendship, and life. I now want to turn things over to Susan, who will share our upcoming schedule of events for Jane Austen and Company.
Thank you, Sonali, and thank you, Eric. Yes, our series, The Many Flavors of Austen, continues. The next one is December 6th, where we have C.K. Chow's Good Fortune, as you might guess, a rewriting of Pride and Prejudice set in New York City among the Chinese community. On December 14th, Sayantani Dasgupta, who has written 2 Austen adaptations in the form of young adult fiction, Debating Darcy and Rosewood, will talk to us. And then in January and February, we have 3 more writers. Uzma Jalaluddin, who writes Austen adaptations set in Muslim communities in Canada. Siri James, who has written historical fiction. about Jane Austen and murder mysteries. And finally, Sam Wright, whose Oklahoma-style musical is called Prejudice and Pride and features Bennett Longbourn and Ms. Darcy Fitzwilliam. It's about class inequity, political instability, and gender. And Inga was lucky enough to see that in New York City earlier this year. So that's what's coming up.
Yeah, and we'd like to just give you a quick teaser about this series coming after Many Flavors. We're going to dive into one of the world's great debates. It's the source of acrimony among scholars. It's a force that can drive lasting wedges into friendships. It's the great debate between Austen lovers and Bronte lovers. We all know what horrible things that Charlotte Bronte said about Austen. What would Austen say about the Bronte sisters? We will invite speakers on both sides of this cavernous divide and the rare individual who straddles it. In the meantime, if you want to keep programming like this free, we desperately need you to keep giving us donations when you register. We know that not everyone can do this, and that's why we want to keep things free. But if you can, please consider donating to this link now or when you register for our events. It really makes a huge difference. Thank you.
And just as a reminder, tonight's presentation is recorded and will be posted on our website, janeaustenandco.org, and to YouTube very soon after we finish talking tonight. And if you can't wait for our next event in a couple weeks, you can view all of our previous programming on the website as well.
Thank you again to everyone, to Sonali and all of those who attended tonight. We hope to see you again at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on December 6th for our next event.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonali.
Thank you.